Okay, we're live. This is We Survived CPS, and my name is Attorney Vincent Davis. I'm a licensed attorney here in California. My co-host for this show is Heather Gentili. Heather is a victim of CPS from the state of Arizona. And tonight we have a very special guest on the show, Holly. Holly happens to be a host on the reality series CPS, The Horror Stories, but she's on as a guest tonight for us to interview and for us to tell her story to us. Heather, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for the audience before we get started?
So my name is Heather Gentili. I'm a mom of 3 little girls who were wrongfully removed from my care 3 times by the state of Arizona in 2020. So my case at this time is now dismissed, and I'm in the process of preparing for a lawsuit against the DCS workers who lied to obtain removal of my girls. So now that my case is dismissed, I've moved on to try and advocate with and for other families who are going through the system. And I think it's always an amazing thing to hear a good story and to hear about closure happening of these cases and DCS no longer being involved and us having our kids. So we definitely want to share those stories.
Very good. And by the way, from me talking to you, you have a great lawsuit, in my humble opinion. And it sounds like you have great attorneys there in Arizona. So go forward with it. All right.
I'm excited.
All right, Holly. Holly is our guest tonight. Holly, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, a little bit about your background. Like, who are you?
Well, I grew up in a household where I had 2 parents that fostered about every beautiful thing in me. And my parents spent money that they didn't have to try and force and endorse all of my dreams and ambitions, whether it be ballet that I quit, and then tap that I quit, and then I got into band and I stuck with it. And I went all the way. I went to district band, honors band, and I tried out for the Chicago Amateur Symphony. I was probably on target to go to Juilliard, but I attract bad people, and so therefore, one of the fathers of my children happens to be one of those people. And I've just been trying to survive, ever since. Once you get with a narcissist, you do the best you can. So that's where I'm at. Still fighting. 7 years later, still fighting.
Okay. Well, tell us how are you involved with this crazy CPS thing?
My ex began to weaponize it. His sister and his family have connections within the agency in our state of Illinois. His aunt, and I'd love to use names because I have no problem using them. I don't know if you would allow it, but I have no problem using them. I've already used them in many other interviews. But long and short, his aunt is a trustee here in my city. So he's very affluently connected, which made things difficult. I'm fighting City Hall. So it started with a domestic battery that was soon to be a cover-up because the police didn't arrest him when they should have. And then DCFS became a weapon every time my ex was trying to avoid retribution for his crime. That's the best way I could sum it up.
Did you lose your children during the CPS case? Holly, can you hear me?
Oh. Sort of. I mean, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So when this first began, my parents were given custody of my children, it was one child then. It was one child back then. And the grandparents were given custody of the children because the caseworker point blank looked my ex square in the eye and said, I am not giving this child to anyone in your family. That is not going to happen. So my parents were the foster parents of my oldest child for 18 months. And then I got out of that courtroom and then was dragged in. As soon as my ex found out I was pregnant with my new baby, we started this rigmarole all over again. So there have been 7 separate investigations total.
Okay, and then eventually, didn't DCS place the kiddos with your ex at one point?
Most recently, well, basically, my oldest child was placed with my abuser in March of 2000, I want to say 2019. Then I got him back. And then after that point, then DCFS got called again. Then COVID hit. So I had no way to take it back to court. So I had to just sit and wait until the courts opened because I needed an evidentiary hearing. I've been trying to get one for 6 years. I can't get an evidentiary hearing when COVID hit because it's all on Zoom and I need to be able to hand over evidence to the judge. So that thwarted all my plans. So I wrote out the COVID situation. I had a new baby, so I just stayed home with the baby and took care of the baby. Then my ex started weaponizing DCFS over and over and over again to the point where I was in such contact with the state central registry and the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, the DCFS advocacy office, and the director of DCFS here in the state of Illinois. I had contacted every single person to let them know that someone was abusing their system. I reported them and everything else like that. Well, finally, a woman that I had talked to multiple times at the state central registry, she finally wrote me a letter and said, if you believe that false reports are being made on you, this is how you get your recourse, long and short. I mean, it was like a paragraph. So I'm just kind of giving you the quick version. And so I reported him. Hopefully that stops his excessive weaponizing of the agency. But in the meantime, he's basically ruined almost every good thing that I've had going for me for the past 7 years.
And did you have to do any services?
And unfortunately...
No, you're good. Go ahead.
The first time around after the domestic, they ran me through the gauntlet. And what I didn't understand was, why are you going after the victim of domestic violence when he almost beat me to death? Why are you going after me like this? Why aren't you trying to help me? Why aren't you trying to assist me? Why aren't you trying to be, genuine and care?
Yeah,
you're supposed to care about the kids, but if the mother has been beaten, I'm not somebody that deliberately jeopardized my children. It's not like I said, hey, you know what? I think it's a great idea that you sit in the other room while I get beat up. That is not how this goes. So these caseworkers get 40 hours of training. Okay? That's as much as you get to grocery bag at the grocery store. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, no,
I don't have much more to say about that because, I mean, do you have classes in child development? Do you understand the dynamics of domestic violence? Do you understand the domestics of sexual abuse? Because yes, a husband can rape his wife. Do you understand any of these things? Before you come and yank children from the protective parent, I mean, there are protective parents, protective fathers out there right now that are getting subjugated to this situation. It's offensive. The victims and the victims' parents that are also victims are getting crucified while the abusers get to run rampant. It doesn't make sense.
I know it doesn't make sense at all. I had domestic violence as part of my case as well. And it's so difficult because they have no idea on how to handle these situations. They're not competent enough to handle these domestic violence situations. There's parents out there that need their assistance and go to them for assistance, and they just kind of set them up for failure. They could have been there for my family, and I feel like they could have been there for yours as well. But all of a sudden, it just seems like a lot of victims become the target in these cases because, I don't know, from my point of view, I feel like the abuser has already shot themselves in the foot with the abuse. So the only standing parent is then the victim. And so if the standing parent can be taken out of the situation, then they're adoptable children. And so I just see kind of how that's a train of thought, maybe something that I just go on, but I definitely see that as something that happens over and over again in these domestic violence cases where the victim all of a sudden becomes like the perpetrator to them. So I'm so sorry that was your experience as well. It's as a victim of DV and somebody who's been through it, it's not something that is okay to go through, and they're supposed to be there to help. They're just not equipped to. So as far as services, how many did you go through services every time there was a investigation? I know how they were with services in my case.
Uh-oh,
They
I'm
try to
losing
push.
you.
Oh
I'm
no.
losing you.
With services, they try to prolong
All right, I
everything.
got it. I guess
Perfect.
I had to tap my phone.
You're good. So with services, how many services
Yeah,
did
they
you
do.
go through?
Okay, like
Oh,
if I had to pay for it, okay, well, just paying to get out of their courtroom, just to get out of their courtroom. That was before entering family court. I spent $87,000.
that's
And
ridiculous. And
my lawyer was phenomenal. I've already put a fantastic review on his page because he was phenomenal. I mean, he fought tooth and nail. He quote the Constitution. He went after him. He said, this is unconstitutional. This is a direct violation of her civil rights. She has
that's
been completed
awesome.
with her safety plan for over 8 months. All you're doing is waiting for her abuser to play catch up. And he went off. He was phenomenal. I had two of the best attorneys in my county, and they did everything they could. And my judges were just menaces in the courtroom. And that's where it ends. It begins and ends with the judges. All they do, and you know what? Even if they just have a bad day, they take it out on you. But I'm
Mhm.
sorry, if you're, and I call it domestic violence victim survivor. We are survivors, my dear. We are not victims.
Yes, I
We were
agree.
victims when we were in it. We are survivors now that we're out. That's as
Yes,
far as I go with that. But, I still have the nightmares. I went to, PTSD therapy. I have done over 800 hours of therapy, over 400 drug tests, 2 hair follicle tests, a 6-month and a 9-month hair follicle test, 4 mental health assessments, 2 psych assessments, 3 parenting classes, 2 of which were the same. And all of that was in just the 18 months that they were involved after the domestic.
How did
I
your
mean, these
third
people just
party
ran me through the gauntlet.
How did your third parties
What?
handle how did your third parties, as far as your therapy and all of that, do you think that that was a benefit to you? Were you able to take from that? And do you think that they were supporters of you through all of this?
Well, initially, when I had the safety plan immediately after the domestic, my caseworker had absolutely no regard for my ex. Did everything she could to keep my child out of his hands. And that's why when she said, we're going to end the safety plan, you've done everything you're supposed to do, we're going to end it. Pardon me. I begged her to stay. She was the only redeemable person in the entire agency in the state of Illinois, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, wait, there's two. And they were from that initial contact. And they sat down with me the second time that my ex dragged me into court, where I was handed off to a privatized agency. And they said, you're in real trouble now. Here's what you're going to do. And they gave me the lowdown and they gave me the steps to take. And I was placed with people who were going to help build my case against the agency. But unfortunately, they were also collateral damage. Every person that helped me, every person that helped my case got fired or reprimanded or taken to court for violation of policy within the company because they decided that they were going to go outside the box and defend a mother and her child. So we lost a parent advocate within the district my child was in. Two drug testing individuals that were drug testing me on behalf of my doctor. That was the follow-up drug test to the agency's drug test so I could protect myself. They got fired. The director of the treatment center that I went to, because she gave me my entire medical record, which exposed them for what they did wrong, she got fired. Their bodies have been rolling for I don't know how many years. Why do the bad people get to keep their jobs and why do the good people have to get fired?
Yeah.
I don't
No, that's something
understand.
I've seen as well. My third parties had a difficult time standing up for me. Their agencies wouldn't allow them to write letters. They stood up for me during my meetings and everything, but it was hard to get them to put things in writing. Thankfully, my therapist owned her own practice, so she was able to. But as far as my parent aid services and all of that, they would speak up for me in meetings. But again, they wouldn't put anything in writing. And my thing is, from my point of view, the way that I kind of saw it was they have these contracts with the department. And so if they were to have an opposing view to the department, then they're not going to be seen. It's kind of like they told my family members, because you don't see what we see, you are now a threat. And so they didn't place my girls with my family because nobody understood why my children were taken from me. So that's what I see, is they're really protecting those contracts that they have. That's a lot of money and a lot of jobs that depend on those contracts. So they can't really stand up
Yeah, but at
against
the
the
same
department.
time,
It's not right, but that's just what
we
I
have
kind of
one
see going on.
we have one individual we can thoroughly blame for this. There's one person that is on my docket that should be held accountable for this, and that's Hillary Clinton and the ASFA and the CAPTA Act. It incentivized taking children. So now, like, for example, in the state of Illinois, the highest paid caseworker in the state of Illinois makes $247,000 a year. You're a social worker. How are you making almost $300,000? That's doctor pay. You don't have an MD. And these people are not even remotely qualified. You don't have child development courses. You don't have any type of child abuse negotiation. You don't have any domestic violence expertise. You have no substance abuse expertise. You get 40 hours of training to take children, and your only job is to take children and take more children every year. That's your only job.
And it's so difficult.
And then the good ones,
go ahead.
And then the good ones, they usually either get fired or quit. Because the one caseworker I had on the first round with the domestic violence, she goes, Holly, I could quit at any time. These people put too much on my plate. They're asking me to do things to parents that I'm not comfortable doing, and I don't want to do this. But this is my job. And until I find another, if I get fired from DCFS, I'm pretty much not going to get a job anywhere in my field. And she wanted to help kids that were children of sexual abuse. They're sexual abuse victims, and or developmentally disabled children who don't have a voice. She would be blacklisted from the industry if she went out against DCFS.
Exactly.
So instead, she went to the district and she got a job within the district as a social worker, and now she's overseeing my son, even though my ex doesn't know it.
Yeah. No, Vince, is that something that you've seen in the cases that you've been a part of, as far as the third parties and everything not having much impact on the courtroom, and more of DCS caseworkers or child services caseworkers having more of an impact in the courtroom than, say, a written statement from a therapist?
You know, I see that. And one of the reasons why is because this is just my belief. Judges, you know, they're not out in the field. They don't see you. They don't see your children. And the way that the code is set up, especially in California, is that the social worker is supposed to be the eyes and ears of the judge.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is sometimes I get the feeling a little bit too much reliance is placed upon the eyes and ears of the judge, being the social worker, because what I don't think people realize is that social workers have their own agendas. And it's not the agenda that most people think, right? Most people think, well, they're going to do the right thing. They're going to tell the truth. And they're there to help reunify the child, if at all possible. Now, you know, I'm a private lawyer, so I get calls from people, you know, where they're just a mess, right? I don't get the call where the person tells me, oh, you know what, Mr. Davis, my social worker is great. She always tells the truth. I don't get those calls, right? Because I wouldn't. You know, why call me if your social worker is doing a great job? But I get the calls where the people say, you know, social worker's lying. I actually took the deposition of a social worker in a civil rights matter where the social worker admitted to lying to the judge. And I get the feeling sometimes judges, I don't know if they believe everything the social worker says, and if they don't, where is it on the scale? Because if somebody lied to me in a case like this and I was a judge, I'd be outraged because I'm about to make decisions that affect a whole bunch of people's lives.
Mhm.
You know, and when I make a decision as a judge to send a kid to foster care, that's a huge decision to make for some kid.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I'll send a kid to foster care, and the kid might end up being abused in foster care,
Mhm.
right? Emotionally, physically, sexually, you know. So it's a problem, and I think it's more of a problem of human nature.
Mhm.
And I think that there can be, laws carefully crafted to solve these problems. But, anytime we change law,
Well, one of the things I figured out, I
anytime
apologize.
anytime we change a law, it costs money.
Mhm.
It costs the state or the county money. For example, I don't know if it was off the air or on the air, we were talking about jury trials.
Mhm.
Some states allow you to have a jury trial. I
Mhm.
think I think Oklahoma is one of them. But in my state, they don't allow jury trials. You know why?
Mhm.
You know
Why?
how expensive it is to put on a jury trial?
Yes.
It's extremely expensive. Now, do I think they should have jury trials or at least give you the chance to have a jury trial? Yes, I do,
Okay.
because we're making such huge decisions, about people's lives and about children's lives.
Yep.
But
In my opinion, it's actually a more impactful decision than a criminal case. So I don't understand why there aren't juries. I do understand the money aspect of it, but when we're dealing with something such as a child and parental rights, I just think it's absolutely insane that a court and the court alone has this power and the public doesn't have any say whatsoever.
yeah,
Well, one small reform that I would recommend to the family court system and the juvenile court system would be to always have a court reporter present, just like they do in a felony courtroom. I'm sorry, but I've spent thousands of dollars to have a court reporter. Then it's no longer a he said, she said. It's no longer a question, but these people do not want accountability. There should never be a closed courtroom in the United States of America. There should never be a point where certain people cannot bear witness. There should never be a point when the attorney cannot bring in his own intern to learn.
Mhm.
It is not a violation of the child's rights if the child's parents give permission for so and so to be in the courtroom. The parents are still the decision makers, but when DCFS takes over, they have carte blanche to be able to do whatever they want whenever they want with no oversight. But we are
Exactly.
changing that as parents. We're taking it
Exactly.
to federal court because you know what? I'm sorry. My county is not going to do anything about it. But when I file, and I'm not filing for a federal suit, I'm filing for federal indictments. I have direct civil rights violations. And something else you need to look up is Senate Bill 1141, which is all about coercive control, which is attributed to domestic violence. But the beauty of the domestic violence Senate Bill 1141 and this coercive control can also be attributed to government entities, to anybody who has coercively controlled you and extorted you and made you do things you didn't want to do under premise of, if you don't do this, if you don't sign this, then we're going to do this, or we're going to prevent you from this. They
Exactly.
can't do that.
Because they
They
don't ask
cannot do that. No
nicely.
one can do that across the board.
They don't ask
So, but
nicely when they want you to sign something. It's always sign this or we're going to take your kids. And they shouldn't be
exactly.
able
And
to
they scare
threaten that.
parents every day.
They shouldn't
And
be
they
able
don't
to
even
threaten
have
that at all.
anything yet. What the parents don't realize is when they sign a release of information, they're giving up their rights, their HIPAA rights, their protections that keep people from invading their privacy. Then they tell you that you have to sign and give them a release for a year. And I've told the agents in multiple occasions, I said, I'm not giving you permission for a year. I will give you 15 days. In that 15 days, you'll have more than enough time to acquire records because I've done it prior to court dates and I know how long it takes.
Yep.
So I will give you 15 days and no more, no less. And that's all I'm going to give you. And that's me complying, but giving myself boundaries. But parents don't even know that they can do that.
Yeah, I refused to sign and I provided my own information. I provided contact with my therapist directly, and then they ended up somehow, some way. I was never a part of the court date. All I know is that when you look up my case, all of a sudden there's a release of information signed by the judge from March of 2020. And they didn't even use it until July of 2021 on a new investigation. And they released information that had nothing to do with my case whatsoever. It was my OBGYN records that had absolutely nothing to do with my case and released it to all parties. So I'm dealing with the Office of Civil Rights right now with that HIPAA violation. Because this is what they do, though. They go fishing. And that's exactly how I see it, is they go fishing for information, and they go fishing for anything that they might be able to slap on a piece of paper and say, this is why we need to be involved in this individual's life. And they didn't find it. But this is what they do. And when you're innocent or even not innocent in a situation, they drag you through the mud. And it was extremely embarrassing to have all of my information out there. And what they did was not okay whatsoever. And I think it was a personal hit in a way. So I completely understand. And you dealt with a lot of HIPAA stuff in your case, Holly.
Well, I wanted to actually shoot a question to Mr. Davis before he jets out to his appointment. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So what would you do, for example, for a client if, say, your client hired a court reporter? Now, I have court transcripts of this whole exchange. My judge read my mental health assessment out loud in front of an open courtroom, stated to me that it was imperative that my ex get to hear it, who's my abuser, and I have an order of protection against, and that he was reading it for the record. Is that not a major HIPAA violation?
Well, it depends. What was he actually reading?
He read the entire mental health assessment, the entire thing in front of an open courtroom, on the record, in front of a court reporter, in front of my abusive ex. The entire mental health record. So I had a mental health assessment done. I handed it off to him to clearly state that I am not crazy, as my ex tries to state I am. I gave it to him, and then he read it word for an open courtroom.
How long was it? I mean, usually those reports are like 15
9 pages.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it
was 9 pages, and he read it word for word.
Okay, so Holly, I want you to listen to this, okay? And you might find some disagreement with it. But I'm not sure that was a HIPAA violation. Mainly because it's a confidential proceeding. Now, that's what probably he would say. However, if you read...
It's a family court proceeding.
Oh, it wasn't a CPS?
It was family court. It wasn't juvenile court.
Oh, then
it was family court.
In my humble opinion...
I had 80 people out in the hallway and in and out of the courtroom the entire time he's reading my mental health assessment.
Okay, you want me to answer that?
I'm done.
Okay. The simple answer is yes. In my opinion, that would be a HIPAA violation. And, I'm just guessing without doing any research, and I'm not licensed in your state. But if that were to happen here, the judge may be waiving his or her immunity for being sued. That's, doing something like that is kind of strange. I get the feeling that in that case, your judge doesn't like you. Is that true or no?
He didn't like anybody. He's a misogynistic gay man. He hates women and he favors men no matter how bad the guy is. I'm sorry, that's just to sum it up.
Do you have an attorney in that case?
I did. I ran out of money. After $183,000 you kind of are tapped. The well is tapped.
So are your children in your custody right now?
They're in the father's custody because of an illegal arbitrary court order written by a woman who's a menace in a courtroom. She wrote the orders without giving me the opportunity to have a hearing to provide exculpatory evidence. So I was never even able to show her that everything she was accusing me of was nonsense, because I already did everything that was required of me prior to. They were using old cases. And I said, I already did this courtroom for 18 months. I already did everything you wanted me to do. I've done things since. I have recent reports from a month ago. But I wasn't able to show any of that because she denied me my hearing and gave custody to both fathers. Now we're duking it out in family court currently. That's basically what she did. She just handed it off to family court. So I didn't lose custody of my children per se. I just have to fight for it. I had just gone public about her 3 weeks prior.
Do you have visitation?
I'm going to have that determined by the courts, just because I want it all on the up and up.
No, my question is,
I've been trying to work with the fathers because the fathers are unworkable.
Okay, listen to this question. Just say yes or no, or maybe you don't know. Has visitation been ordered for you with your children? Yes.
Well,
no.
That's what I'm addressing at this time. No.
Okay.
That's what I'm addressing now.
How many children are involved?
Because the juvenile court judge, she got mad. Two different dads, 2 different children. That one judge in juvenile court got mad because I wouldn't sign her blank release of information. And so because I wouldn't sign something that didn't have any specifications as to what I was supposed to sign, I wasn't going to sign it. And she punished me by taking my children and placing them with an abusive man who has multiple felony and misdemeanor violent offenses, drug offenses, and alcohol offenses, and the other father who was accused of domestic violence. So I just don't understand how this works.
Have you filed any appeals in any of these court proceedings?
Just because I wouldn't roll over and show my belly. I wasn't going to get tied up in appellate court. I'm going straight to federal court. I have the proof in the pudding.
How long has it been?
Appellate court is useless. All it is a time crunch. Since May.
So what's stopping you from going to federal court any faster?
Well, I wanted to make sure that I wrote it properly. I consulted with people that I know that are in the movement that have already done this and gotten the indictments. I'm doing something different. I'm not going for a federal suit, and I'm not going to hire another expensive attorney that's going to take 33 1/3. And in the state of Illinois, Kane County is very, very powerful. We're a very corrupt state. So it's very hard to find an attorney that's willing to represent you. And because my story is so long and so dark, and there's so much information, I mean, just to read through everything I have, I'm sure if I were to sit in front of my other 2 attorneys that I had, it would probably have cost me $8,000 just for them to read everything I have. So that's just to read it, not even to do anything about it.
So I'm always willing to learn new things, and I learn new things all the time. I'm not familiar with a private person going for an indictment in federal court. How does that work?
I'm not really sure. I'm kind of winging it as I go, but I'm going to file a formal complaint and a request for indictments against the individuals that violated my civil rights. I have consulted with several different attorneys, people in the movement, people who have been successful. One individual is down in Texas, was just successful at getting an indictment against their judge. They are looking into it. The investigation has been launched, but the indictment has been filed, officially filed. So that's what I'm going for. I don't even want necessarily to go for like a lawsuit. What I'm going for is these people being put in jail. There is one person at the helm of the ship in my agency in my county that is the boss, and she has overseen every single person who has violated my rights since.
The person in Texas that you referred to, Do you think that we could get in contact with them and have them on the show? I'd love to interview them.
I would certainly extend that, but I think that they're a little gun shy at this time because right now that's still pending. And the fact that they were successful at getting their court to grant the hearing for the indictment and grant everything moving forward is pretty monumental. So I think they'll probably be a little gun shy for a bit, but I could definitely get them on and interview them at a later date. And I could definitely get you in touch with them off of the interview process.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I've never
like
heard
off the record, so to speak.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to them privately because I've never heard of that procedure. In order to get an indictment, from what I understand,
this person also filed a mandamus.
I've never heard of that. In my knowledge, in order to get some type of indictment or investigation going, you first have to file a complaint with, for example, the U.S. Department of Justice. And then they
did that already. OIG, FBI, DOJ, all of it. I did all of that. I did all the proper channels, and so did he.
So I wasn't talking about you, but I just meant in general. Right? In general.
No, that's the stages that we're going through. Like there's a lot of steps. You've got to go up the chain of command. You've got to go from, the low man on the totem pole up the balance. You've got to try and report to all the appropriate people prior to filing these things, or you don't have any credibility.
Definitely.
I don't know what they did. I know what I'm doing.
Vince, I don't want to cut anyone off, but I know that
it's uncharted territory, mister.
I know that you did have to run a little bit early tonight. Did you still need to head out early?
Yes, I'm going to log off. Okay. And you and Holly can continue with the interview, okay?
All righty, sounds good.
All righty. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, no worries. I didn't know if you saw the time or not. You have a good night. All righty, Holly. So so if you would like, we can go ahead. I know it's 8 p.m. We had scheduled this 7 to 8. We got started a little late. We can see about maybe if you wanted to come on a future show. I'm not sure what your availability is tonight, but I have 3 little girls I have to get to. So
I understand completely. And I've got one of my little boys in the other room and my parents in the other room. So you can schedule, like, send Judy a message, see what we can schedule. I would love to speak with Mr. Davis. Like, we were trying to cram a lot in, and I haven't had the luxury of talking to him. So I hope I didn't run a train wreck over him, but
we're all good.
He needed to know what we're all trying to do in the movement, and it's my opportunity to tell him. So I was pretty excited.
Definitely. We'll see about getting you on again as well. And I know, like he was stating earlier to us, he's going to be opening up some other shows during the week and throughout the day and in the morning time. So that's something we can look forward to as well. But I will definitely reach out to you and see if we can get you on my show again or on some of the other shows. Other than that, I hope you have an amazing week. Did you want to wrap up with anything, Holly?
The only thing I want to say is that it was an honor to finally get to even see or speak to Mr. Davis. I'm sorry if I was so rattly, but like I've done so much research and he's somebody I want to pick his brain, and I knew I was like pressed for time. So
you're good.
I would love the opportunity to speak with both of you again. So anytime you're ready, I'm ready, but it's always got to be before 3:30 in the afternoon if possible, because I work most evenings.
No worries. We'll get it all scheduled out. I'll reach out. So thank you, everyone, for checking out our video tonight and Holly's story and kind of what we're doing at this point in our cases. So y'all have an amazing week.
You too. Thank you so much.